The Celtics, they begin the second half tonight, but there's only 28 games to go.
25.
Oh, sorry. Well, who's doing the math anyways?
Me.
That's right. Hey, why aren't you at spring training already, man?
Maybe next week. I'll get out of your hair.
Hopefully, maybe the weather's better out there than it is here. But the Green, they get back to action tonight in Golden State. Let's bring in Joe Vardon. He's a senior NBA writer for The Athletic. And Joe, I think we're all surprised that the Celtics are a second, third seed. Joe Mazzulla's been outstanding. Jaylen Brown has an MVP campaign. But I guess your thoughts on the Celtics selling off everybody, selling off the team, getting under the tax, and here they are for a playoff push here.
Well, since it's my first appearance on Boston Joins the Chat, I feel like I get to make a joke that plays off of the name of the show. I live in Cleveland, and I've lived here my entire NBA career, 12 years now, and stayed here when I got this job as a senior national writer for The Athletic. But living in Cleveland and the success that the Cavs have had over the years, you would think and understand that I had covered quite a few playoff games in Cleveland, and that's true. But Boston has been so good over this 12-year stretch that I have actually covered more playoff games at TD Garden than I have in Cleveland. I thought this year would be the year where that resets a little bit. This was supposed to be a gap year for the Celtics. And, of course, the Celtics have re-entered the chat, folks, because that is not the case, not any way, shape, or form. They are 5.5 games out of first. They are in second place by a half game over the Knicks with 28 games to go, as you mentioned, and they look pretty strong.
I like what you did there, Joe. I certainly appreciate the play on words from you. But considering that Boston has entered the chat, how surprising is that for you, considering the fact that they lost one of their preeminent stars to most of the season?
Well, you know, I guess with hindsight being 2020, it's not surprising now because you know Joe Mazzulla and you know the way that he's wired, and the Celtics, even when they were expected to be great under him, and they would have this injury or that injury, Joe would always demand more out of whoever came in behind that guy. So, you know, you consider what happened between Tatum going down and then the retooling of the roster with Porzingis out and Drew Holiday out. But he just expected the other guys, the guys that you know had carried a lot of the water this year, to step up, and that's what they did. And then we've also really seen who Jaylen Brown is and what he's capable of. I mean, obviously he's having a career year this year. You know, I don't want to give it away because it's not my work. But ESPN does a quarterly MVP poll, and I'm a voter in that. And Jaylen Brown's on my ballot. Wow. Because I just don't think, you know, if you, like, to me, where your team would be without player X is a huge factor for me when I consider MVP. And I have a real vote as well. And I just think if you look at where the Celtics are and also where they were expected to be, the difference is Jaylen. So not surprised because of who Mazzulla is, but just a tremendous regular season achievement going on where you guys live.
What do you think of Jaylen Brown's way of expressing that he has been snubbed for things, or that he should have gotten some accolade that he did not receive? Do you see that as petty, or do you see that as like, yeah, he's standing up for himself? You know, Lucy, I actually would take a third route there. I just think it's a self-motivating factor for him, because he's not always correct. You know, I actually have this is something really cool that he did. It's written into the CBA that if you are, you're eligible for a certain amount of contract, a certain size of contract, if you make an All-NBA team. And those All-NBA teams, again, this is not up to us. This is the players bargain this with the owners. Those postseason teams are decided by voting members of the media, of which I am one. And whatever year it was that he was up for his big contract, and it depended on his if he made an All-NBA team, I voted for him, and he made it. And I have a thank you letter from him sitting in my drawer behind me here. So that's pretty cool. But also, like, to say that he gets snubbed, like, I just don't always buy it. I know, you know, one of the things I do for The Athletic is I cover Team USA and travel all around with them. So I was, of course, involved
in the coverage of him not being on that Olympic team. And you could argue that he had a point, but it's against his own teammate in Derek White. That's who they took when Kawhi went down. And that team was largely built on two very, elder statesmen in LeBron and Kevin Durant wanting to play, and you couldn't tell those guys no. So there would have been a glut of players at that position. So it's a little bit of a hit and miss for me as to whether or not he gets quote-unquote snubbed, but he's an all-star now. I'm talking about him for MVP, and I just think overall people recognize what he has accomplished this year.
All right, we're talking with Joe Vardon. He's from the Athletic MVP voter, as well as he just mentioned there with Jaylen Brown. So you're in Cleveland. We'll get back to some Celtic stuff. I have Cleveland questions. James Harden is now a part of the mix. You trade Darius Garland. And then J.B. Bickerstaff's your coach. You move on from him. He's now got the best team in the Eastern Conference. I do think Cleveland's a threat. I absolutely do. And quite frankly, we don't know about Jayson Tatum's return, but I think Cleveland's one of those teams that could compete in the Eastern Conference here. But talk about the moves they've made, and why'd you move on? What happened with Bickerstaff?
Yeah, well, when you said you had some Cleveland questions, I was worried you were going to ask me about Shedeur, and I just don't. I have no answers there whatsoever.
So now that you mention it, Joe.
No, look. I think, first of all, when we're talking about the Cavs overall, over the last 5 years in the NBA, one of the teams to make the finals was pretty mediocre in December and January and even into February, like around that January, mid-January into February period of time is when they start to boomerang. And that's been true going back at least the last 5 years. It usually happens in the Eastern Conference, and 1 year it was the Celtics. If you remember, there was the Ime year where they made the finals. That was not a very good team in November and December and even into January. And they sort of built themselves up and lifted themselves up to a point where they became a finals team. So when you look at the landscape of who that could be this year, well, Cleveland fits. They were pretty underachieving and mediocre, especially for what was expected of that team in November and December and certainly into January. I mean, at one point they were 15-14. And then you look at what was happening even before the trade deadline. I think they had won 7 of 8 or 8 of 9 before they trade for James Harden. And now all of a sudden they take away the fundamentally, like the worst problem they have. And people say all the time, well, it's a soft team. Jared Allen's not tough enough. Like it's either usually they're soft or people blame Jarrett. But the real problem was it's almost impossible in the NBA to win with 2 small guards. It's only happened 3 times in NBA history, and the Cavs were trying to become the 4th because they've had Donovan Mitchell, who's 6'2", and Darius Garland, who is, in that 6'1" to 6'2" range. And teams would exploit that. So you move on from Darius, who's been hurt all year anyway, and you get James Harden, who's 6'5" and big. And yes, he's 36 years old, but he's playing at an all-star level. And so you add that new component into a team that was already turning the corner, and you do wonder if this is a team that now all of a sudden has enough in an unpredictable bracket to get to a finals.
You mentioned unpredictable bracket, and you said that because of Joe Mazzulla, Jaylen Brown, several other the Celtics pieces, that you aren't surprised that they're number 2 in the Eastern Conference right now. I am surprised that they've actually made it here, but also I think I'm even more surprised that the Detroit Pistons are the top seed in the Eastern Conference. It's kind of a wide open year if you look at it from that perspective. Celtics right there in the mix as well. Do you think that the Pistons can now take it all the way down to the wire, you think, or will there be a little bit more mix into who represents the East when it's all said and done?
Well, Jermaine, I knew that you were going to go there, and so I wasn't actually ignoring Joe's question about JB. And I think now we can sort of get right into that part of the discussion here. JB Bickerstaff is a great man, and he has done an incredible job in Detroit. There is no question about it. But he also has a fairly young team where most of the important pieces there have 0 playoff experience, and his playoff track record is not good. That's just true. Especially, it wasn't good in Cleveland. And then I think he had 1 playoff run before it, if memory serves. And so we are definitely in a prove-it state when it comes to the Pistons.
Right.
I believe that the 6 game, or they're 5.5 up on the Celtics, 6 up on the Knicks. Cavs are a little bit behind that. I feel like the Pistons probably have the number 1 seed locked down. But just talked about how that doesn't really matter as much when we talk about both finals teams. And so I want to see how they do in that second round against a team. It's either going to be Cleveland or Boston, maybe New York. All 3 of those teams have ample playoff experience, tested veterans. And now we'll see. We'll see if the talent and the discipline and the togetherness that the Pistons have shown during a regular season, if that stuff holds up in a playoff, and if the mistakes that JB has made over his career in terms of rotational decisions in these playoff series, if he's learned from those. Personally, he's a guy that you can root for. And so there's part of you that just kind of wants to see that happen. But there are some heavyweights there in the East who were counted out for one reason or another, and all 3 of them have seemed to have gotten it together.
When it comes to Joe Mazzulla and what he has done with this team, do you think he is making the case for himself to be Coach of the Year?
I don't think there's any question. He has my vote. I just for all the things we said at the top of the show, with just where they were, what happened, how the summer went, and then what was expected of them. He's just done a tremendous job. And, sometimes, if we're just being honest, occasionally you take into consideration with awards like this, like how a coach deals with the media. And that's just human nature, because these are people that we have to interact with. And his interactions are rough occasionally,
to say the least.
With some of the guys, But I just think that his coaching has transcended that, and whatever personality differences. I have never had a problem with him personally, but my colleagues, whatever differences there may be there, I just feel like he's outcoached that, and he deserves the. Go ahead.
You ever asked him what his favorite scene in The Town is? He tends to talk about The Town quite a bit.
No, I could see why he would like that one, but I leave that to the J. Kings of the world.
Oh, yeah. Well, Joe, I got to tell you, it sounds like you've had a lot of lobster rolls and clam chowder here in Boston. You're certainly feeding into the green. There's a lot of debate here locally, not us, but locally, about Jayson Tatum's return and why is it so dramatic, and he has to do this special, and everyone's speculating now. I have March 1st.
March 22nd.
March 22nd. April 10th. People think I'm going to be catering his birthday party. You know what I mean? I'm down with that, by the way. I got party hats and everything, but what are you hearing, right? Because everything I'm hearing, at least locally, is he still doesn't know. What do you think, Jayson Tatum? Do you think he knows when he's coming back? Or
I think that he is at the point in his rehabilitation where he probably knows that that he's healthy enough to play. But there is a big difference between knowing that you are physically healthy enough to do it and being comfortable returning, not only with an injury like that, in which a ligament failed. So you have to get over the concern that happens again. That's natural. But also you have to consider the mental hurdle of everybody around you has been playing basketball every day, every single day since late September. And they are what we would now call playoff shape. They've had 6 months of doing this over and over again, and now they're ready to go for a playoff run. Jayson Tatum hasn't been on the floor in a game that matters since May. And he's obviously gone through a lot of stuff in between that. And so the final hurdle for a player like this who's trying to come back before the year is up. Oftentimes this is a year-long injury. So historically speaking, he should not come back this year. But his rehab has progressed to a point where he could. But now he's got to battle with himself. Am I physically able to hang with a group that is playoff ready when I am not? That's the first thing. And then the second thing is me coming back being a step behind those guys because they've had those 6 months. Do I hinder our chances? Do I mess up the rotation and sort of what they have going because I have to come back and get acclimated to playing, and they have to get reacclimated to me. I'm not saying that those questions lead to him certainly sitting out for the rest of the year, but if you want to know why this is drug on, just given what we've seen in terms of what he's able to do on the floor in these practice sessions, that's what it is. This is the hardest part right now. When you know physically that you're probably there, like able to return to playing in a game, but it's just different when you're trying to return and it's a playoff. And so I think that's a very heavy subject matter for him, and that's what he's working through.
Yeah, he did say a couple weeks ago that these are the best players in the world, and I'm sure we'll figure it out as it relates to just that cohesion and obviously what Jaylen Brown has become and his best career year right now and leading this group and falling into that mix. He feels like they'll be able to do it. But before we get you out of here, Joe, I got to ask you, I meant to ask you this earlier, and I expect this to be a yes, but you just never know until you ask it. But you said Jaylen Brown sent you a note, a thank you letter. Was it handwritten?
Yes. Yes, it was.
I knew it. What a guy. Yeah. He was raised right.
Nice.
Yeah, it was cool. Yeah. Yeah, there was a play. Incredible. There was a year I was covering the Celtics. It was the Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks, and I apologize that I can't remember exactly what the story was, but it involved him being able to recall a professor that he had in college. And I talked to him about it in the locker room after a game, and he was able to not only recall vaguely who the person was, he remembered the name, and he remembered the message that had been delivered from the professor and why it mattered to him in that moment. And so we're just talking about an eternally perceptive, thoughtful individual who often says what's on his mind. Occasionally it gets him in trouble. But I do, I trust Jaylen Brown to put thought into what he's saying before he says it, and certainly one of my favorite athletes to cover.
All right, Joe, one more before we go. I don't know. How do we save the NBA? Right? Supposedly Adam Silver saved the All-Star game. I don't know about that. But tanking, what do you do? How do you stop this? I came up with an idea. I was thinking about this last night. You just remove some lottery balls. I think Lucy and I were talking about this. Just when you have like a penalty, you remove lottery balls. And then when you do something good, you get more lottery balls. Like, how do you fix this tanking situation in the draft?
Yeah, I mean, when you said save the NBA, my thought went to, well, they're in year one of a new $77 billion media contract. Right. So I think that's quite a big life raft there. I don't like the tanking. And I've been on a number of shows and just been a part of these debates, and the answers are all over the place. Yours is as good as any. There's been discussions about having it do it in pods and rotate the pods by year, so every year you're going to have a top 5 pick, and then so the other 4 years there isn't an incentive to tank. We go all the way up to getting rid of the lottery. We go all the way up to getting rid of the draft. I think there's all these things on the table. You could have relegation, which will never happen in American sports. I am on the side of the reason why tanking is a problem. I think it's twofold. One, it's about the integrity. It's about the integrity of the sport. And so for the same reason that gambling is an issue, is why tanking is an issue, is the paying customer, the person who's paying for the ticket to the game, or, by the way, all of us who buy these streaming packages, the fees for the network that carries the Celtics or carries the Cavs or whoever, that's built in there. Okay, so we want to make sure that our money is going to something legitimate. That's the first thing. The second thing is, you could talk to me about a bad baseball team that plays out the string in September, or a bad football team that's out of the playoff hunt in December. But still, by and large, those teams are playing their guys. Like, maybe the quarterback doesn't play Week 18, but if you have, like Paul Skeens, he pitches for the Pirates. They're no good. He might be the best pitcher in baseball. He's still taking the ball in September. So this is really an issue more so in the NBA than in any other sport. And I think it's for those two reasons that they have to do something to address this.
Yeah. We blame Kyrie Irving. That's what we do.
I mean, we got to blame somebody.
I'm sure you do too, right? You can blame Kyrie as well for everything. Joe, excellent job, man. We'd love to have you back. Maybe get a Celtics-Cavs little playoff matchup.
Yeah.
We'll get you back on,
the
man.
Garden.
Yeah, I'll come and see you guys. We'll hang out.
Let's
That'd be
go.
great.
That'd be awesome.
I would love to have lobster rolls and clam chowder with you. He's Joe Vardon of The Athletic. Appreciate you, Joe. We'll catch up soon, man.
Thank you,
See
Joe.
ya.
Thank you, guys.